Y-Block Ford V8, what are the 7 deadly sins? Let's take you through all 7 very quickly. This engine block began in 1954 in 239 trim. When it first came out, there were only two lengths, 2 sizes of head bolts. We have the longer up top, and then we have the shorter on the bottom. Later on, I believe in late 56, 57, we have a 3rd size. Now, what this means is, and we'll take a look at these bolts, is that the 2 longer bolts will go on the 2 outer holes on the top of your block. So you'll have 4 of these, 2 each side, go on either corner here. Don't mess that up. If you do, you're going to have trouble if you're swapping the bolts out to get your head gasket to seal. Deadly sin number 2 would be your head gaskets. Each Y-block head gasket should be labeled with the word front on the head gasket. We'll hold it up real close so you can see it here. You got to make sure that when you put your head gaskets on your block, both of these are situated with the word front towards the front. If you try to flip them back around, let me show you what's going to happen. You can see this one's oriented correctly here. This says front right at the front of the block, and we're good to go. The big deal is that your coolant passages towards the back need to be open. For instance, if we take off this head gasket and just flip it around like we do on a lot of other engines, you can see what happens is this coolant passage gets blocked. There is no coolant passage up here for flow. What this will mean is you'll be sealed for compression and oil and all of that, and even sealed for coolant. But what will happen is these back few cylinders here, the coolant will not flow towards the front. Make sure that as it reads, that you're towards the front. The other thing too, if you want to check, you see there's a corner made up here when you're installing your head gasket. You can see this is rounded. Make sure the corner's up towards the front and at the top on both sides, and you'll be good to go. Here's a steel shim head gasket. You can see on this side, it's not labeled front anywhere on this side. If I flip it over, however, it is labeled front, but all the same, you got to make sure your corner hits the front part of the block. Deadly sin number 3 would be your lifters and making sure that when you install a brand new camshaft, you install new lifters. These are obviously the mushroom variety. Ford uses these on their tractors as well in the 50s. But with the flat tappet camshaft, these have got to be mated. The lobes have got to be mated to each one of your lifter faces. This is actually convex, not extremely flat as you would think. You put this on a square, you'll find that out. If I can sit here, I can wobble this on the workbench, but that is extremely important. If you don't do that, you will wipe out a cam very quickly if you try to replace one without replacing your lifters as well. If you want to save your cam when you pull it out, and if it's okay, make sure when you pull your lifters out that you match each lifter to each cam lobe if you want to save it for future use. That's very important. Deadly sin number 4 would be your timing set. A lot of guys think that what happens when you put your timing set together is it's like a lot of modern engines, and that the 2 timing marks that are on the crank gear and your cam gear, you kind of line them up. There's nothing further from the case here. Oddball kind of idea with the Y-block is that you've got to take your timing gear on your cam gear here, put it at the 3 o'clock position, right? Just about right there. And then what happens is when you put this crank gear on is that you line up with your timing chain and you get 12 dots between this mark here on the camshaft gear and your crank gear. That is very critical. A lot of guys will rebuild their engines, get the Y-block all together without checking a shop manual or anything else, and they'll end up putting that thing in just an odd location for timing, and the engine will never run right. Man, that's a deadly sin. Deadly sin number 5. This will not be a catastrophic failure, but it will be a nuisance, and that is the rear main seal. This is the real main seal cap, of course. You want to make sure this is installed correctly. Just to look at the two-piece seal, you've got to make sure that your lip, and I'll show you a close-up here of what the lip looks like so that you can see that it's installed correctly. All right, if you can tell, and as we put this into the block here, the lip of our seal is actually facing towards the interior of the block. We also want to have the parting line of the seal itself, maybe 1/4 inch, maybe a little bit more than that, offset from the parting line of the retainer and the block. This will help you with sealing up that rear. No sealer goes in here. You may want to put a little bit of white grease on your lip. That's fine. A little bit of oil there. No sealer in here or in that cavity for what's inside the block. However, you will want to use just a dab or two when this is going in, maybe here on these edges to help seal. I always encourage you to use the type that are sold with the pins. And these seals here that go in the side, it's important. You may want to use a little bit of sealer here along the edge. A lot on the internet about this, but don't make this mistake. Don't make this deadly sin for your Y-block. You don't want to leave puddles everywhere you go. Deadly sin number 6. This is probably the worst. And I've seen this in a lot of different vehicles, and guys complain about their Y-block being sluggish. Can't get the distributor to work right and everything else. This is a 64 F100 distributor. I've got another video or two on my channel and on my website that talk about just replacing points and stuff with pointless ignition from Excel and different things. A lot of guys go Petronics and all of that. But, however, it's important to remember from 1954 to 56, Ford used a vacuum advance only distributor. There was no mechanical advance from 54 to 56. This meant that each carburetor and distributor and those engines from the factory were matched together. The signal had to be right. A lot of guys, what ends up happening in the modern day is that we'll swap out an intake, we'll put a 4-barrel on there, put maybe a 2100 or whatever on there, 2-barrel, and we don't know or don't realize that this distributor has also got to be upgraded. We've got to go to a 57 to 64 model that will have mechanical advance as well. If you mismatch the two, what will happen will be you'll never get enough advance out of your distributor, and your engine will run like junk and detonate. Just a lot of problems. You really don't want that. Make sure that if you're still running the original distributor the original carburetor from 54 to 56 and you want to run a modern distributor, you can make an easy change, an easy upgrade to your 54 to 56 distributor. There's a great article online from my buddy Ted Eaton. We've got all the information on there, pictures, diagrams, how to do it. It's very simple to do. And you'll get the proper signal to your distributor and the thing will work right. If you try to put a low-to-matic, now this is a 64 F100 distributor, but if you try to put a low-to-matic 54 to 56 distributor onto a modern carburetor, you're going to have so many problems. Don't commit this deadly sin. And the last deadly sin is this one. It includes the intake ports. Now this is a 57 ECZG head. These are the largest ports that Ford had. In 54 and 55, you have a real smaller, and I don't have any of those heads right now, or I would show you any of those intakes. But boy, it's a good, probably 3/8 of an inch or so more narrow. And what happens is if you try to take 57 and up intake and try to put it on early heads, you're going to have a mismatch. You will get a vacuum leak at your intake here where it mates up to your head. You don't want to have that happen, of course. It's hard to chase. Make sure that when you're looking at your intake manifold gaskets and you're trying to get things to seal up with your intake and your heads, that you've got the ports lined up correctly. That's so important to remember. Even in the aftermarket in the 50s, Edelbrock, Wyand, Fenton, Offenhauser, different things, They had some of the early intakes, 54 and early 55, and then they had some of the later intakes and different things. In 56 or so, late 55 and 56, there's one that's just slightly smaller than this, and it'll work fine with that head size. There's not a whole lot of them out there, but all the same, you want to make sure this is right. Don't commit this deadly sin. These 7 deadly sins here, don't commit them. Some of them are deadly, others not so much. But man, you want your Y-block Ford running great. Keep that thing in your car, in your truck, and let's keep those Y-blocks on the road. Guys, thanks for visiting the channel today. We're so glad you stopped by, and click the like button, subscribe, and all the rest of that stuff. Visit hotrodreverend.com very soon. There's a whole lot more on my website with articles and great information on this 1955 Ford Club sedan I've owned since I was 16. We've got another great video coming out. 3 upgrades that you can make to your Y-block Ford V8, especially for those of you that have a daily driver. You drive to cruise-ins, you drive to shows quite a bit. It'd be a real big help to you. You don't want to miss that. So make sure you subscribe and click the bell so you know when the next video is coming out.